Okay, well, good morning, everyone. What we're going to look at this morning is the advanced protection options within cTrader. So before I show you on screen how we set it up and work, I just thought I'd run through the maths behind it so we can see how it works and how it should help. So we're going to start with a mythical trade that we've gone into at £1 per pip, with a stop of 100 pips and a limit of 100 pips. Now, what the advanced protection does, it allows us to set levels at which we can take off part of our trade. So as the trade's going in our favour and hits some intermediate targets that we set, we can gradually reduce our stake. And I'll show you the impact of this. So initially, if our trade is 50 pips in profit, so this is at £1 a point, we can close half of that trade. So that would give us a profit of £25. So 50p times 50. So that means we're now trading at 50p per point rather than our initial £1 per point. So our stop, instead of being £100, has now reduced to £50 because we're only at 50p for that 100 pips. But it's also brought the value of our limit down as well. So instead of if it hit its limit getting us £100, because the remainder would now only be at 50p, that remainder would now only get us £50. But we've already made £25 profit. We've got it in the bank and it's ours and can't be taken away. So if our trade went on and hit stop, it would be a real loss of £25. And if it went on and hit target, that would be a real profit of £75. So you can see the effect that that has on the stop and the limit. So it really can help us reduce our loss. So instead of it being £100, if we'd left it at £1 a point and it had gone on and hit stop, we've reduced our loss down to £25. So this is where you start to realise there is a huge difference between pounds and pips, that it's possible to make the same loss of 100 pips, but in real financial terms, that can be quite different. So if we go and have a look at cTrader, I'll show you how we can set this up and what we can do. So this is Euro New Zealand, just a Euro New Zealand chart, and I'll switch it to a 1 hour chart. You can see I've got my market direction indicator open. So that's telling us really it's looking as though in general this is in sell mode at the moment. So I'm just going to put a trade on the system. So I'll click on my sell button, but I'm going to increase this and I'm going to make it 0.1 of a lot. And I'll click on sell. So we now have our trade on the system with a default stop and limit of 100 pips, which I have set up in my settings. And I'll show you in a minute how we change that within the settings side for the quick trade options. Now, it could be that I look along my chart and I see here there is an area possibly of support and resistance. So it could be I want to set a level here to take some profit off. There's two ways of opening up this advanced protection. You've either got this very little tiny symbol here on screen, a shield symbol, or you can click on the shield symbol on your trade entry. So I'll click on it here. And I have 4 levels of advance of take profit that I can set. So I could have one at 10 pips, one at 20. We'll make this one 30. And then we'll make the next one 40. And we can choose the quantity that we take off. So for the first one, I might just want to take off 0.2. And it tells me at the bottom here the quantity I've got remaining. So we do another 0.2, 0.2 and 0.2. So that would leave me, if it hits all these levels, with 0.02 remaining. I can at this point also tell it to move my stop loss to break even at a certain point. So I'm going to tick that box. So when I'm up 25 pips, it will also move my stop loss to break even, and I'll click on apply. So what you can see on screen here, I've now got all these different advanced take profit levels, and I've got my initial stop still at my 100 pips. It could be, looking at this chart, I don't want my initial stop at 100 pips, that's way up here. I may just look here and see, yeah, if it goes much above these previous highs, then the chance of it returning in my favour are quite slim. So you can manually adjust your stop, and it will still move it to break even when I'm 25 pips up. So I'm just going to zoom in my chart a little bit more so you can see a bit more in detail. And if you want to get back to the right hand side of your chart and the current bar very quickly, you can click on your little timer here and it moves it right back there for you. So I can see here my different advanced take profit levels. So my fourth one is at the bottom of these candles. So I may choose to move that down, and I can do the same with each of them and manually position them on screen where I think different levels of support and resistance are. The other thing you could do, you could look at this previous move here. You could draw a fib on this, and then if you chose to, you could move your support and resistance levels to your various fib levels. The other thing that I've been doing when I've been trading recently is having a trailing stop loss, so that then as my trade is moving in profit, it's trailing the stop for me. To set that, you can double click on your trade and just click on trailing stop and click on protect. Now when that moves to break even, that will trail from that point. So I set my move to break even at 25 pips. So when I'm 25 pips in profit, it will move my stop loss to break even, and then it will trail that 25 pips behind the current price. So in that instance, I've been deleting my take profit. So clicking here and clicking on that little delete button, so that if this trade does go on for 100, 150 pips, I'm going to be trailing that 25 pips behind. And that then gives me a chance of catching some of the longer running trades that we get during the day. You can see on each of these, it tells me my actual profit in pounds. And what you would see when these start to trigger and it hits each level, in your history, it will list each of these take profit areas as separate trades. And this is what I mean about where pounds and pips can be deceptive, because if this goes on and hits all of these levels, that will be 50, about 120 plus pips just by getting 52.9, 53 pips up. So if I were to list all of that in a spreadsheet, it would look like I've made 110 pips, whereas as far as I'm concerned, in reality, that is only 53 pips because it's all part of one trade. Does everybody understand that so far? Any questions from anyone on what we've done? So Philster said, Mark's asking, can we add a position as well? I'm assuming by that you mean that when you're up 10, can you increase the lot size that you're trading at. Not with the advanced protection you can't, but what you do have, you have this little button here that you can click on that will double your stake size. So if I click that, I'm now trading at 0.2 lots rather than 0.1. But you will see here it hasn't adjusted each of these advanced take profit. So if you then wanted to up these at all, you'd need to come back here and adjust them. So I could make this 0.4 to take into account the fact that I've just doubled my stake size. From what I've seen so far, Nick, yes, it does take the spread into consideration when it moves to break even. The other thing that I've been doing on that, this is going back to James's methodology, in that I've been adding a pip so that it's always going to lock in another pip for me. So as soon as it's up 25, it will move to break even plus a pip. And again, if you were to close this trade at any point, it would obviously take off all of those advanced take profit levels. And it will remember the levels that you set for your next trade. So on my live system, I think I've got it set to 20 pips, 40 pips and 60 pips are the three levels that I normally use, because on London Breakout, the targets seem to be about 70 to 80 pips for the pairs that I'm trading at the moment. Any other questions? No, not at the moment. Okay, one thing to bear in mind, that you can't put this advanced protection in place until the order's actually triggered and become a trade. So unfortunately, it's not something you can set up when the orders are placed onto the system. The other thing to bear in mind is that you have to have your machine and cTrader running for these to trigger. It's not something that is done in the same way as a normal stop or limit on the server against the trade. It is actually done from cTrader running on your machine. So you would need to leave it open and running if you want that to trigger. I've been experimenting with this because if we can find a way of using this methodology successfully, then it's something that we can code and we could bring into a future version of London Breakout. So you can set these levels and all the time the bot's running, then it would do this for you. But before we do that, I wanted to manually trade it for a while and find the best way of working with it that's going to give us a reliable profit and minimize our losses, because I think that's fair to say what everyone is looking for is a reliable method of making pips with minimal losses, because when you start compounding things, that works best with a nice smooth equity curve. No other questions so far? Okay, we have one question asked on the WhatsApp group about these little market indicator bit at the top here that tells us that 45% of our client accounts have open positions that expect it to fall, and it will be 55, expect the price to rise. All the time you have the quick trade buttons, this shows, except for the DAX and Dow when it doesn't. And this is something that's controlled by IC Markets and cTrader, and unfortunately we have no control over this whatsoever. What I would say though is that we always have to bear in mind, you know, brokers have this warning on their websites now, and I know for IG, I think their statistics have improved, but it's still about 80 to 85% of their clients lose money trading. So if, for example, 80% of them think you should go short and 20% think you should go long, I'm not entirely sure how much weight I would place on that if the majority of them lose money anyway. One other question that's come up is about stake sizing. So you can see here I've got my stake set to 0.1, and that's telling me on this account, which has currently a balance of about £1,200, that equates to a balance risk of 3.97. Now, for it to calculate that, that needs to get a default stop and limit from somewhere. And that is from within the settings side. So if I go and show you, under settings and under quick trade, we've got a stop and a limit here of 100 pips. And those numbers that you see on screen are actually calculated from this stop and this limit. So if I change that to 10 on each and click on apply and close that and come back up here now, it's saying my balance risk is now 0.4%. So that's one way of checking the figures that the bot's coming up with on your risk. You could come down to your settings and under quick trade, put in the stop that the bot's using, say 31 pips. It's also important to click on the apply button at the bottom. And then you can see the balance percentage risk and also the balance of your equity risk. Now, the equity will be changing all the time if you've got open trades. So the calculations the bot uses are based on the balance rather than the equity. Any other questions or queries from people? In that case, we'll wrap up this morning's session here. During the week, we are hoping to release a new version of the super trend that doesn't have the same issues with false flicks as just about every single version of the super trend seems to have. It looks like we've actually found a way around that, which we've been testing, and we've had somebody else beta testing it for us as well. We're working on a new bot. Phil's just reminded me to tell everybody. This would be called a mix and match bot, which is based on a super trend flip strategy, and then you can add in other criteria that you want it to look at. So we're quite excited about this because lots of people have asked us for a super trend flip bot, and lots of strategies are based around a super trend flip, and then the trade management again will still be up to you, but you can set different entry criteria, and we've also set an exit criteria that you can use of a reverse flip. Again, we're hoping to have this released either later this week or early next week, but certainly by the end of next week we should have a version that everyone can use. And we will keep you updated on the WhatsApp group and through the emails that you get from Patreon, and we will be producing a video to show how it all works and how you can use it, and also how you can back test it.
Mark's asking, are you set and forget on your live account also?
Okay, am I set and forget on my live account? No, I'm not, because I've been using this methodology this month really to see how it works in practice. So I've got bots running at the moment on GB New Zealand, Euro Yen and Euro New Zealand on the London breakout. And as soon as it goes ding to say that I'm in a trade, I log on to the VPS and I set up these advanced protection levels. And what I'm looking at really are higher time frames and support and resistance levels. So if you look here, you can see this level where I've put my stop loss, as well as being resistance here on the 4 hourly. It was resistance here. It did break through it, but it's come back to it and now it's tested it again. So that's quite a strong level. Okay, if you can't get it working, don't worry, just type your question and we'll read it out. Yeah, the recording will be available later today once Phil has gone through and done his magic with it. Apparently it's an easy one this week, so I haven't had the computer problems I had last week. Okay, Phil's saying he'll give you a call about the optimization and the one that only does 100 passes, because there will be something wrong. And we know there are issues at the moment with the latest version of cTrader and optimization. We do have a beta version of what they're hoping to release, so we can have a look on that and see if the same issue is there on that one. But Phil will contact you. Any other questions? Okay, so if there are no other questions, we'll wrap it up there for this morning. And as I say, Phil will post the video online later. We'll put the links into WhatsApp, and you'll also get the email via Patreon. But thank you all for coming along this morning and listening to this. Hopefully you found it useful. And if there's any specific subjects you'd like covered in future, please message us and let us know. And then the aim is to make these webinars as useful as possible for everyone here. And we'll be going through some more of the functionality of cTrader as well, and how you can set up other bits and pieces in future weeks. So thank you for listening, and no doubt chat later on WhatsApp.